So at the end of that night, I just went, that's it. I am a surf, whatever you call them, surf bum, beach boy, surfer. That's my life. I am a surfer from this moment on. And whatever it takes, I'm just going to surf every day of my life from now on.
Welcome to the Water People Podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept and interesting water people on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, this is a place to exchange not just ideas and practices, but stories, experiential knowledge gleaned from the aquatic adventures that shape us. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small. Today, we're in conversation with shaper Bob McTavish in front of a live audience at the 2024 Byron Bay Surf Festival. Over more than half a century, Bob has shaped thousands of custom boards. Always an innovator in surfboard design and technology, Bob McTavish has pioneered cutting-edge changes to the basic concept of a surfboard since 1965, when he began to refine rail and bottom design to maximize performance. This was part of the movement that would become known as the shortboard revolution, in which Bob's role was pivotal, but only part of his ongoing contribution to the evolution of the surfboard. Now in his 8th decade, Bob continues to push the limits of surfboard design across the full range of wave-riding vehicles, including the shape that we focus on in this conversation, the 10-foot-plus glider. After 5 years dormant, Bob brought his objective surf contest concept back to our local surf festival with 3 rules. 1, boards have to be over 10 feet. 2, the furthest up the beach wins. It's all about length of ride. And then you have to paddle around a very wide buoy before you catch the next wave. And rule number 3, you've got to stay on your feet. You know how you see some older people out in the world and they still have that lively sparkle in their eye? That's Bob. He's still so full of design ideas, full of gratitude and wonder. Surfing is full of old men who calcify and only speak of the good old days and back when they could shred on a shortboard, blah, blah, blah. And Bob is not one of those guys. And we're so lucky to hear from him directly about how to stay stoked.
The right thing to do is to start the right way, and that is acknowledging where we are and how we got here. So we need to acknowledge the Bundjalung and the Arakwal people, the people who looked after this place for a very, very long time and did so in a way that made us all here able to surf with all the other animals that we go and surf with, have us be able to catch a meal for our families. So many things that we take in our daily lives as absolute pleasure and a joy and a reason for living here comes from the long lineage of people who have been here looking after this place, and hopefully we can do the same. So acknowledging those people, past, present and into the future, and also acknowledging the nature of this moment and that we've just had a big wet in the middle of winter coming into spring. And that's a great thing because we're not going to go into bushfire season with a dry country. Acknowledging that there's fish everywhere in that brown water out there right now. Anyone who is around Broken today would have seen and felt that. Yes, other things will be growing in the paddocks, that's right, Shez. Then also acknowledging that the great whale migration is about to come south with their babies, and that's a huge part of living here. And just being so grateful and stoked that this is our home. How lucky are we that this is where we live?
Yeah.
You know, seriously, sincerely, we are so fortunate. So I would like us to just start the night that way, just feeling grateful and so grateful to be here with one of the originals and someone who can give perspective in a way that very few other people can, and that is Bob McTavish. And so thanks, Bob. Thanks for having us here, brother.
Thanks, Dave. I went out in my backyard this afternoon and, like you said, the rain just cleared. It was warm. it was like spring started today. All the plants were just going, big sigh of relief, and everything started to bloom. Today's the beginning of our blooming season.
Blooming.
In preparation for our conversation tonight with Bob, I picked up one of his couple of books. And in the foreword of Bob's second book, More Stoked, Phil Jarrett describes him this way. I loved this description. Quote, Bob McTavish is surfing's laughing leprechaun, a smiling tribal elder whose stellar career as surfer, shaper, innovator, and design visionary has been an inspiration to 3 generations of surfers. Thank you, Bob, for being here with us tonight. We relish getting to sit at your feet, ask you questions. Your voice is such an important one in our culture, so thank you for humoring us this evening. We always begin the podcast in the same place by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Would you be willing to share a story like that with us tonight?
You bet I am. I mean, a couple of massive personal events changed my life. And the first one was just meeting my wonderful wife, Lynn. We've been together for 54 years. And we lived together for a couple of years. She's a hot chick. And yeah, she's been wonderful. And together we went on a spiritual quest, and we got to know the Creator, which I think was massive in my life. But the thing that really affects us tonight, and with surfing and gliders, was one night in Brisbane. I used to work for 4BH Brisbane as a panel operator, and I was 17. Yeah, I didn't work. I got the sack, actually. I got the sack for not showing up on Mondays because the surf was good. That was in Brisbane, and I was surfing the weekends up at the Sunshine Coast. But if the waves were good, I never got back, so eventually they sacked me. But I'd been sacked for maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and I was living in the Caloundra Surf Club in the first aid room because the clubhouse was closed Monday to Friday and open on Saturday and Sunday. And there were like 60 or 70 members of the club, and those clubs were surfing in Queensland in 1961. And there was, every beach had a surf club, and in total, you had a couple of thousand clubbies every weekend at the Gold Coast, in those days called the South Coast, and the North Coast, which is the Sunshine Coast. And there were a couple of thousand clubbies. So this night, the word was around, I don't remember who told me, but there was going to be a surf movie showed in the New Farm Theatre in Brisbane. And back in those days, movies were the big deal. Like television hadn't killed movies, and the theatres were huge. And they had 1,000 seats in movie theatres in those days. And every suburb had a big cinema. And they would show 2 movies and a newsreel or a cartoon for 9p or for a shilling. So that was the big deal. So we heard about this surf movie that was on. What? Surf movies, someone said? So I hitchhiked from Caloundra to Brisbane, walked around half the city to get there, and there was hundreds of clubbies, and I've met a lot of them at South Coast and North Coast, staying in different surf clubs. You could do that for free. You had a free bed every weekend. That was the deal. And then you do a patrol, save a couple of lives or kill somebody by negligence. And if you rode a surf boat, you probably kill someone. So there's this giant crowd. So I roll up at this place and I pay my 10 shillings, which is a fortune, and I see these guys taking my ticket. This guy with long blonde hair and a duffel coat, an ex-army duffel coat and a pair of board shorts underneath. And no one had long hair. This is buzz cut clubbies. It's just crew cuts, buzz cuts, short hair. And there's these 2 guys taking tickets with this super long hair and duffel coats. So they eyed me because I was getting that way myself, because the last 6 weeks I've just been surfing 24 hours a day virtually, and I was sunburnt and brown, and they spotted me and spotted them. I chatted, and they turned out they were from Sydney, travelling with Paul Witzik, who was running with Bruce Brown, running Barefoot Adventure and Slippery When Wet, the first surf movies ever in Queensland. And we filed into the theatre. The projector was set up in the audience. It wasn't 30, it was only 16 mil. And the thing spluttered to life, and the power died, and everyone goes, whoa, big screams and yelling, and the clapping started, that old routine. And finally the thing came to life, and then the theatre lights went down, and it was only a small screen compared to CinemaScope. We were used to the big treats. Bruce Brown walks out in a white suit and a red and white floral shirt and welcomes everybody in his American drawl. And he's standing beside the screen with a sound setup, upping and fading the music and killing and doing the microphone live. And we were ecstatic. You see the first pioneer footage. And then guys going down to Mexico and surfing 1-footers and gliding. But the lifestyle that was projected on these movies was incredible. And so at the end of that night, I just went, that's it. I am a surf, whatever you call them, surf bum, beach boy, surfer. That's my life. I am a surfer from this moment on. And whatever it takes, I'm just going to surf every day of my life from now on. And I did, until I got too old. Now I only surf weekly instead of daily. But that changed my life. I committed to surfing whatever it was in that form. Mate, a month later I was sanding surfboards in Sydney with those exact same guys. And then I was shaping within 6 months. So by 1962 I was a shaper.
Wow.
Wow.
Bob, you quit competitive surfing in 1967, and when you did, you made the decision to move the focus of your surfing to really feeling out surfboards, to exploring
Correct.
the minutia of sensation and experimenting with design. We're sitting in your factory, well, just outside of your factory. It's basically a surf rat's candy shop, like everything beautiful and delicious is here. The smell of resin is thick in the air. You've done the work of facilitating fun for so many people over the years. How do you reflect on what you've built here? Like, was it a good decision? Did you make the right call?
Well, I've made a lot of mistakes. We all do. We're always learning. I'm 80 years old. I still lie awake some nights kicking myself for making dud moves. But it's a good life. And making surfboards, no regrets, whatever. It's been actively engaged. My mind is still on better surfboards. You know, it goes on and on. You know, surfing is such a wonderful thing because it's not WSL. It's not the QS. It's us going to the water and jumping in and entering the wild. You know, like in such a buttoned-down world and a confusing, complicated world, just to drop your board in the water and jump on and start paddling, you are suddenly in another world. And it's the world of nature and creation, and it's the wild. We're in the wild, and it's just it's right there for us. For every person on Earth, it's there. It's quick access to the wild part of the planet, and it stabilises you, and you realise what life's all about. And it ain't the frantic, button-down, money-earning race that has dominated our planet. Yeah, we're here for fun, you know.
And how fun. I was surfing broken today. I hadn't surfed in a few days. It was kind of windy, kind of rainy, and then the sun came out today, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the funnest thing ever. I'm only 25 years into my surfing experience, and still, it's the funnest thing ever.
It's so fantastic.
Does that stop?
No, it just gets... It gets better and better. It does. Surfing gets better and better. And because you select how you want to do it. And like for me, my number one requirement is uncrowded. And number two, I hope the sun's out. Some place it doesn't matter about the quality of the waves so much anymore. It's just being able to be there, ride a few. You know, you get terrorised when it's 8 to 10 foot, and you still ride a couple. You love it when it's 2 foot, 1 foot, you're still having fun. And there's always something stimulating. As a surfboard designer, your brain never stops. That quote you said in 1967, that's true. I stopped competitive surfing, and I only did that because contests were the meeting of the tribe. Still are. I mean, this event, the Byron Surf Festival, is a meeting of the tribe, and that's what's so good about. And that's what contests were in the 60s. It was a meeting of the tribe. Egos got in there a bit, of course, as they do. We're all human. But it was just a gathering. So I said, I'm not going to be a competitor. I want to make better surfboards. And that you can do that until you're 80. You can still keep working on making better surfboards without being a competitor.
Yeah, 100%. And we see that with your enthusiasm and curiosity. I know that whenever we get to have a yarn and there's always, design ideas being tossed around and reflections on certain shapes and things, it just seems like there's an endless combination of curves that we can jump into and play with. And specifically right now, that series of curves is stretched into the gliders.
Wonderful.
And so there's two right there, a multi-fin and a single fin.
Yep.
And getting into that world of long rail lines, you know, I know you and I both love the stronger waves that we have in the area that don't wake up very often.
Yeah.
And we won't name them, but we love them. And
Yes.
it doesn't get over 6 to 8 foot often enough around here. So one of the ways to keep sane for us, perhaps, is getting on gliders.
Yes.
And having something that gives you that feeling of riding a gun in serious consequential surf, but in waves that you just have available, which is, you know, often smallish waves around here. So the glider, Bob.
Dave, I view it that it's 100-year-old knowledge, or more. It's 100-year-old art that's been ground down a little and buried, and now it's become resurrected. And 30 years ago, I stayed with Skip Fry in California, and Skip took me out on his gliders, 14-footers back then. But where it came from is so fantastic. When I look back in history, it's the surfboard makers that I identify with rather than the surfers, and it's the shapers.
Like Chris Garrett.
Yeah, Chris is a cool cat, but I'm thinking way back. See, fortunately, I'm old enough to have overlapped with Duke Kahanamoku, with Joe Quigg, Phil Edwards. I've surfed alone with Phil Edwards. I've chatted with Duke Kahanamoku by himself because no one was interested in him in Hawaii in '67. Joe Quigg, chatting with him last time I was in Hawaii, and the wonder that Joe holds. He's the guy that took the first catamaran. So you're building a cat in your backyard right now, a 30-footer. Joe made those 60-footers and 80-footers, the first one in Waikiki, which has become a tourist thing, but he did the first one in the 40s. He built the first catamaran in Waikiki. He was riding boards with fins before Tom Blake. And Tom Blake took a patent out on a fin surfboard. But when you look into it carefully, it was an aluminium fin that he cast and took a patent on. But they've been riding finned surfboards, and I've seen beautiful photos of them way before, 5-6 years before Tom Blake. They were riding finned surfboards because the hot curls just weren't good enough. The hot curl was, okay, take back before that. When the redwood boards from California and Hawaii were wide-tailed, no fins, round rails, no rocker, and you'd stand and go straight to the beach as best you could. A couple of characters, Rabbit Kakai was the hot dogger as the surfer, but John Kelly and Joe Quigg got axes out and started reshaping the tails, and they shaped pintails with deep Vs. And as soon as they paddled out and took a wave, they could turn, and the deep V pintail would hold in the wave on a severe angle, and they'd generate a huge amount of speed at Waikiki. It was just blowing their minds. They discovered this angling and this diagonal surfing that previously was sort of unheard of. I mean, Captain Cook, you saw the Pipo boards, you saw the Elias, but you didn't see long redwoods with their tails holding up in the curl and these long hulls out the front, and them standing in the middle and going like rocket ships at diagonals through Waikiki. And that was the beginning of the gliders. And so I say Joe Quigg, he's a hero to me, you know, like he's I love Joe. And his wife, that's the best story. Because Joe lived in Santa Monica. He was a professional surfboard maker from 1939. Was drafted into the Army through the war, but straight after the war he started making surfboards. When I say he was 2 a week, that was his living. He could make 2 boards a week and support himself, and then he married his girl Aggie, and they could get through on 2 boards a week. But that was all the demand in California. There was 100 boards a year, and they were balsa boards, and they'd shape the balsa board with round rails, then they'd glue a thin veneer of redwood over it, just by veneer sheets, and then varnish it to keep the water out of the balsa. So they were quite techy. But then along came Bob Simmons, who started doing the same thing, and Bob became famous for making these balsa redwoods. But Joe had been doing it for 5 years before that. Even the balsa came from the Army rescue rafts. They used to carry them on the ships. They were made of balsa because it was so cheap and light. And then if the ship was going to sink, they'd chuck the thing overboard, and the soldiers and the Marines would jump on these things until they got picked up. So the balsa came from the war. But at the same time, the first fiberglass came from the war as well. And so Joe got into that, as well as the 2 other characters that are pretty amazing. And Matt Kivlin is one. And Matt passed away maybe 10 years ago. Joe died just 2 years ago. And I think Aggie might still be alive, his wife. And she was a beautiful chick on the beach. And Joe, his girlfriend, they married. And then he made a special board for her at Malibu, which became the Malibu Chip, which was the first 9-foot balsa lightweight fiberglass boards. So Aggie was the first to get onto the high-performance gliders, which in 1956, when Tommy Zahn and Greg Knoll came out to Australia, that's what they bought. They bought Malibu Chips, which were basically made for Aggie. Mm-hmm. And the Aggie shape became the bomb. And Velzy got onto it, and away it went. So Velzy was doing Aggie's boards type thing, little 9-foot Malibu Chips, which still were gliders. They still did the glide like a 9-foot log today because they were heavy and gave them momentum. So look, that's my rave about the old history. But then along came Phil Edwards, and Phil was the essential glider. And everything was about trim. And Reynolds Yater was the god of shapers at that time. But Reynolds was a very humble man. But he got the rails so good. And he got the rocker so right. And he lobbed at Noosa in 64 or 65 when I was shaping for Hayden Kenny. And he could make it through National Park, like there's the sucky section and then there's the long fast through the middle, when no one could quite make it, He made it every wave. And not just wave selection, it was his rocker. And he flattened the rocker out 2/3 forward, so it created a longer, flatter trim line. And his templates had some parallel in them, so that there was a hot spot 2/3 forward, and he would get onto that hot spot and he would fly through National Park, leaving everybody in the dust. And so suddenly you realise that trim, us Aussies realised that trim was the king, the king of surfing in the 60s. Through the shortboard revolution, trim was the game, and Phil was the greatest. But we all tried to do it, and to very amount of success. Midget got really good. Midget was Australia's best surfer without a doubt. Midget was a good drop there. Not as good as Ray Cleave, but not as good as you, Sharo. It was. So Phil, if you look any footage of Phil, you'll see he hunts out the speed spot. When he travelled shooting surfing holidays, that night at the Picture Theatre, the movie's insane, we're all yelling and whooping. Then on came Phil on screen. Bruce Brown turned the volume down and said, "This is Phil Edwards. He's regarded by all his peers as the best surfer in the world." And then he said, "Phil is in the audience with us tonight." We all went, the sound in the theatre was disbelief, sighing, and so Phil, the world's best surfer, was sitting right there. We were going, this is insane. I had the privilege, next year Phil came back for the 64 World Trials, a couple of years later. I had the privilege of surfing with Phil alone at Palm Beach. One morning, he was staying at Paul Whitsick's at Palm Beach, and Russell Hughes and I rode our skateboards down to Palm Beach for a morning session. Our boards were stashed down there. And there was Phil in the water by himself, like 6 o'clock in the morning. I went, no. So we watched Phil, and trim was the game. He faded left, slowly getting to his feet, but looking right. So he's sizing up the section where he's going to hit the speed point. So he fades, whips his turn, takes 2 steps, then sneaks a half a step onto the trim zone, and there's this perfect pocket, and he just rockets through this pocket, just perfection. And then back there was into a cutback. And we just went, wow. There he is, real, right in front of us. So Russell and I quickly grabbed our boards and paddled out. And Russell didn't stay around, but I stayed while Phil kept surfing. And to see the perfection of trim, the man doing himself. But Phil learned it all from Joe Quigg. He learned it all from Gard Chapman, Mickey Dora's father. He learned it all from Bob Simmons, Matt Kivlin. They were the masters of trim, because they had heavy boards with momentum, and they learnt to use the mass and the momentum to make surfing fast and powerful through small pockets, which they would line up the pocket perfectly and stitch it up down through the centre.
So that happened, and then boards shrunk, and you were pivotal in that exploration, and then decades went by where we were all fascinated by the idea of surfing in circles, up and down, zigging and zagging and everything. And then here we are now, where there is this resurgence, this rediscovery of that kind of trim.
Yeah.
That feeling of standing there. And I would say that most people who have gotten on a longer board and experienced that trim feeling love the sensation of doing nothing but still going fast.
Beautiful.
And that for a lot of us, that is kind of the opposite of what we've been exposed to for the last few decades. When we think of surfing imagery, it's heavily masculine, it's heavily commercial and acrobatic and muscular and aggressive. And you listen to the language by the surf competition people and it's all very aggressive and militant, you know, oh, they're killing it. Oh my God, he nailed that turn. Oh, she's ripping it. It's all this, it's very aggressive, right?
Yep.
And so I think a lot of us at this point in time have seen that, tried it, not really enjoyed it, because most of us are like jumping up and down on little wafer boards trying to generate speed, and it feels pretty shit, basically. Then you stand on a board like that, one of those two there, or something similar, and you can stand there and just appreciate the experience a whole lot more. Do you look at that arc and that period that you're talking about where the roots of surfing were starting in this form in Australia and around the world, and then all kinds of deviations happened and commercial things, all kinds of stuff happened, and then now here we are at this point? I'd love to know your thoughts on that. What are we looking at?
Malibu, 1953. Joe Quigg.
California.
Joe
Malibu.
Quigg and Bob Simmons.
No way. Wow.
Bob Simmons is on a 65-pound board. Joe's on about a 30-pound board.
Wow.
Yeah, that was gliding. Okay, I can answer that question from two perspectives. One as a surfboard designer and one as the culture of surfing. I mentioned to Lauren the other day that the whole surf contest world was constructed by Quicksilver, Rookill and Billabong to make a buck.
To make a buck, to
I
be
love
clear.
that
That's
point
what you
of
said
view.
at the end
Yeah,
there. To
and
sell stuff.
To sell stuff.
Yeah.
And I still stand by that. Yeah.
Love it.
It's just an invention.
Tell it how it is, Bob.
Sorry,
Well.
Claw and Sending and Gordon.
Oh, yeah, Greasy.
Greenie.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Love you all, but you did it for make a buck.
100%
Yeah.
the whole way through. And a buck off the back of people sweating in other countries, exploiting them and selling that T-shirt and
Yeah.
making a lot of money.
Yeah,
It was a pretty dark world.
Yeah, I won't dig too deep into that part of it because,
Yeah, we're here to celebrate. We're not here to
you get
talk
really
shit about all that.
No, but it's true that the surf magazines existed for that purpose too.
Yeah.
It ain't surfing, really, So I go back to what the other aspect, that's looking at it socially, but from a surfboard designer, in 1967, when we started the shortboard revolution, we started planing. We were planing on top of the face of the wave with fins generating speed and manoeuvrability. The gliders, they were generating their speed from in the wave because they're displacement. The difference between planing surfing and displacement surfing. This on the screen is displacement surfing. And we actually pass through the wave like a foil does today. You see guys foiling and you can't make sense of it sometimes. The Adam Bennett and the way he weaves all over the wave and out on the flat and back up again. Where's the power coming from? Well, that power is under the water. But when you put a board through the wave, you're starting to tap into that power. And it's there, it's a real force. But it's only generated by having waterline length and trimming lines. So the water is opened up, flows around the rails and along the rail like a hull. So it's a displacement machine. Displacement surfing is ultimately like you look at the surf club guys paddling those 20-foot racing skis, picking up a wave out of Wattigos and riding to the surf club in a green swell. That's the ultimate displacement surfing. They're riding green lumps like foils. So we're only just getting started. The gliders are only just getting started. And I've ridden, as I say, I've rode skips and Eden Sauls and other shapers around, but I reckon in another couple of years they'll look quite different. I think we'll have a lot higher rails, and I think we'll be, and finer perhaps, penetrating more into the wave, but we'll be gliding on greener waves more and more because of that incredible hidden power that's in the wave just below the surface.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone and Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small, right from the heart of Byron Bay. Stone and Wood isn't just about brewing beer, it's about building a community. Certified B Corp and driven by environmental and social responsibility, they're all about making a positive impact one sip at a time. Their philanthropic arm, the Ingrained Foundation, supports local grassroots organizations, channeling funds and volunteer hours straight into the communities they call home, focusing on environmental and social causes close to the heart. Here's to Stone and Wood for crafting exceptional brews and for making a tangible difference in our Northern Rivers community. Patagonia is in business to save our home planet. Founded by Yvonne Chenard in 1973, Patagonia is a surf and outdoor apparel company based in Ventura, California. As a certified B Corp and a founding member of 1% for the Planet, the company is recognized internationally for its product quality and environmental activism, as well as its contributions of nearly $230 million to environmental organizations. Patagonia's unique ownership structure reflects that Earth is its only shareholder. Profits not reinvested back into the business are paid as dividends to protect the planet. Futures makes the first surf fins from recycled fishing nets. Alpha Net Plus is an innovative collaboration between Futures Fins and Borreo, blending carbon and discarded fishing nets. To date, they've transformed more than 35,000 kilos, that's about 77,000 pounds, of discarded fishing nets into new alpha fins at their headquarters in Huntington Beach, California. Nets that would have otherwise ended up in the ocean. Made for high performance and tested by the best, from our very own Dave Rastovich to friend of the podcast, John Florence, Alpha is available in a wide range of fins for those who want to make a difference with every wave you catch. Learn more at futuresfins.com. The best summer surf seasons go hand in hand with fried eyeballs. Looking perpetually red-eyed might be an indicator of good times, but it also hurts. Good sunnies are a non-negotiable, but ours inevitably get jumbled in the beach bag and the lenses get shredded by sand. Child, that's CHILDE, Eco Eyewear reimagines the way we use sunglasses. Instead of tossing out frames because of scratched lenses, the Child for Life program offers free lens replacement up to 12 months from purchase and for a small fee thereafter. Child makes sunnies and prescription glasses from plants, not petrol. It's eyewear that's made to last and able to be repaired for a smaller energy footprint. Let's reimagine the culture of disposability together. Learn more at childeyewear.com. Dave, do you want to talk about a board that you have and the cyclical nature of design concepts? We were talking about a board.
Yeah. I wanted to hear Bob's thoughts on this. So a few years ago, I was banging around with George over the hill, and George was making some stand-up edge boards. And I rode a couple and had some interesting experiences. And then I borrowed his spoon mould from way back, edge bottom spoon mould, and I made a board to stand on, basically like a stand-up, one of his knee boards.
4 foot, eh?
You've been down that path
Yep.
well and truly.
Better
So
4
one
foot,
thing that
yeah.
tripped me out was I had a Dick Van Stralen fish that Dick Van made in like the year 2000, I think it was, or 99, with Rich Pavel at Burley Heads. Anyway, I laid this fish on top of the spoon mould and they were identical.
Wow.
The outlines were identical. Dick Van had never met George.
Yeah.
You've seen his boards from afar and everything. But here was this proof that there are certain hydrodynamic principles and shapes that move through and on top of water that just work.
Correct.
And I was looking at that and marveling at that you can have people from all kinds of walks of life all over the world come to a similar place.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? And do you feel that there's that kind of 100th monkey moment happening all the time where people come up with similar ideas and we just sort of tap into a way to interact with water, like you were just saying with foils and how that's happening in the deeper water energy there?
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
I've been asked about the shortboard revolution a lot, and I usually answer that its time had come because there was a general discontent with the way boards were going, and there was a general curiosity about introducing the vertical elements into surfing. So I think you're right. I think it's a force of surfers and efficient lines that are proven to pass through the water effectively for a human between your feet. That's your only control control you got is between your back foot and your front foot. So everything in front is your radar that feeds on to your trim zone, which is your front foot, to your power and control zone, which is your back foot, and then it exits off the back.
That's so fantastic. I've never heard anyone explain a surfboard in that way. Did you all get that? That's something you got to take home and keep in your brain and feel in your body next time you ride a wave. The front is the radar feeding into your front foot.
Yeah, the trim zone.
The trim zone. Into
the power zone and control zone, your back foot.
And then out through the
tail.
wake.
Your tail feathers off the back. So,
unreal.
But Joe Quigg did that. Joe had the tail rocker. Mike Henson, when he did the down railers in 69, I couldn't get him to work because I had George's thinking of a dead straight tail rocker was fast. But Henson put the tail rocker in and his drop railers were phenomenal in California through 69. So I still argue with George. Like literally 2 weeks ago, I was arguing with him about straight tail rockers versus straight to your back foot and then kick it out.
So good. So two 80-plus-year-old surf rats are just having a go at each other about a few inches of fiberglass.
You got it.
Yeah, it's so good.
Exactly.
There's no hope for us, eh? We're till the very end of our days.
We're sucked in.
That's so good.
Hopeless humans.
Bob, I'm curious to ask you about your renaissance with the long rail and riding gliders. For you, was it an age adaptation? Was it a cross-country adaptation for your own surfing? What was it?
Yeah, cross-country was an appeal. The surfing was Skip. One day, Skip and I paddled it. We made sure we got Mike Henson, pulled him out from his dumpster. Sorry, Mike. And scrubbed him up and put him on a board. And the three of us were determined to ride a wave together. And Henson was on a glider, one of Skip's, and I had one of Skip's. And so the three of us took on a wave at Pacific Beach. And like, I only filmed it in my head. I wish there was a camera around. But we cross-countryed that day down through PB. But the other aspects you asked, yes, age, it sure helps when you can find nice glider waves like we have scattered around our town. But the blooming things are bloody heavy. So I've drifted back to my 5 kilo styrene model. So, yeah, the gliders, when you're 80 and you're carting a 35-pounder down the beach, it's hard work.
It's a commitment.
Yeah, and you can't fit them in your car, so you've got to put them on the roof and you've got to hide them when you go surfing on something smaller. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm still addicted to getting a 9-foot glider working because I can stick it in the back of the car. So I just made a new one.
We're here because the Byron Bay Surf Festival is on, and you have an event that you've run the last few years called Trim.
Yeah.
Why run a length of ride contest, and what does Trim have to do with good surfing? When we think, I mean, Dave was kind of alluding to this before, Trim doesn't necessarily define how we think of good surfing anymore. Yeah. What do you have to say about that?
It's very difficult. We put a buoy in the water, and you've got to paddle around the buoy. So the furthest distance you can travel from that buoy before you step on the sand is a measurable surfing feat, a measurable one, not
objective.
A subjective. It's totally objective. So that's got to be the fairest way to judge surfing.
True.
And especially when it's challenging, like at Watergoes where you get a deep inside channel and you can go screaming down the beach almost to the pass, but if you don't step on the sand, it doesn't rate. So you might have to go left at Watergoes, hug the rocks, tweak through some crappy little 6-inch dribble and then generate across the shore and see how fast you can get before your fin scrapes. That's a challenge. That's a surfing challenge. That's just pure fun.
We had Jerry Lopez on the podcast a couple of seasons ago, and we talked about this practice of riding waves all the way to the sand, stepping off on the sand, and how that was full respect for that wave of energy.
Very good.
That was the way to honor that energy, was to ride it as far as possible.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's like eating food and thinking about it. Like
enjoying the flavor.
Yeah, instead of walking down the street munching on a pie. It's appreciating the little creation that you're enjoying.
How was Olympic surfing for you? Did you take it in?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't follow it much. But, I watched the classic wave that the local kid rode. It was awesome. But I'd much rather watch Kelly at a wave that's 5 times as big, doing the same thing at Cloudbreak, which it looked just like Cloudbreak, a mini Cloudbreak. But Kelly rode out there 10 years ago or something where he was bumpy and windy and the thing was massive and he's just working the bumps and the ribs and incredible surfing. I mean, the kid was great. He killed it. But it was only one wave. Ho, ho.
I'd love to open up. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask the great Bob McTavish? You have his audience right now. Now's your chance. Anyone?
He's not great, he's just a little monkey who likes surfing.
I can say you're great. Anybody? Any questions? Burning, design, controversial, historical dates, or legacy questions?
We should have planted a few in the audience.
Yes, come ask a question.
What's your first experience of boiling for a tea tree?
What about tea tree?
First experience, first wave.
First wave of tea tree. Went up, this is weird, because Lester Bryan brought a really crappy surf movie to Australia called, I've forgotten, it was so bad, shot by Val Valentine, who lived right on the beach at Sunset Beach. And he saw Bruce Brown making bucks out of surf movies. So Lester Bryan was a law student in Sydney, got this brainstorm to bring this movie out from Hawaii, Val Valentine's The Big Waves or something, and it was the crappiest movie, most boring, bad, fuzzy classical music sound, all shot from his house straight out at Sunset. He toured, Lester laughed his head off because he rented a theatre at Cronulla, $10 shillings? 10 shillings, yeah, like a buck to get in. And the place was jam-packed. He had to do 2 screenings, a 1,200-seat theatre, had to do 2 screenings, but he did 2,400 people. So he's got all these, which is $1,200, like back in those days, would easily buy you a new Holden or 2. A new Holden was 600. And he could buy 2 new Holdens with the takings of that night. So he was laughing his head off, making money. Drove him up here. I jumped in the car with him at Kirra, and I said, look, he wanted to shoot. Val Valentine had a camera with him. I said, well, there's this place called Noosa. Let's go up there. So we drove as far as Moffat's first, and we went for a surf out there, and there were fish jumping all over us. We drove on to Noosa. The National was a bit small. I said, well, round the corner. So I'd been there in 1959, 1960, so this was like 62. So we tried around the corner. Another guy jumped in with Brian Shields, and Shieldsy was a crazy cat. So we walked around the tea tree. Val Valentine laughed and said, that's not surf. That's just dribbly little garbage. I'm not going to shoot that. So we surfed naked out there. It was only 3 of us, me and Brian and Lester. So that was my first surf at tea tree.
Right.
We went full native.
Naked National Park. Yeah, why not?
Tea tree.
Fits, yeah.
No one there.
Tea tree, first memory. All right, so anyone who goes and surfs tea tree from now on will see the spirit of Bob McTavish naked in the lineup.
Did you have a question?
Just simply put, beyond land, in your estimation, does a longboard become a glide?
When it displaces water, so like in our showroom there, we've got high-performance longboards, which are basically 60-40 rails and edges in the tail. They're not gliders. It's when you've got a roll bottom and a high rail, the board runs through the wave rather than over it. So there are basically, surfboards are either displacement boards or planing boards. All shortboards are planing boards. Elias are planing boards. Everything's a planing board except a roll bottom with a high rail. So good logs from the 60s, all the log remakes are all gliders, but it's when you stretch them, it's when they really get the great characteristics. I think 10 foot's the starting point, really, if you're going to call them a glider. I'm trying to make a 9-footer, but it's not working. You've got to get to 10 feet before they start to get the correct lines.
Great question. Great question.
Thank you.
I have a question. Quivers, board options.
Yes, wonderful.
We have endless options, especially in this area. There's so many people, creative, incredible minds playing around with all directions with surfboards. What are the essentials? Right. Like, this is a period in time where, a lot of us are scraping through. Rent is pretty gnarly. Food's pretty expensive.
Yes.
It's like, what are you going to spend your money on when it comes to a surfboard? If you live in this region, point breaks, smaller waves, everything under 8 foot really is our consistent surf. What do you feel are the essentials in a quiver for this area and the waves we have?
That's great. So when I moved here in 68, after being in California for the first time and seeing how the coastline in California was crowded, and I went, oh, we've got the whole East Coast to play with all these point breaks. So I came here in 68 after surfing here through the 60s, but to live, I made a new, a Rincon/tracker. It was in the 710 category, and I made a 9.3 glider, which was, a involvement model, roll bottom rails, pinched rails. And so you'd surf Lennox in the morning, then the sou'westers, surf the past in the afternoon and the sou'easters. Those two did the job for me 50 years ago, 55 years ago. But now, it's similar, but, obviously now with high planing boards and really sophisticated fins, I think people need to investigate those areas for their high-performance surfing. Whether high-performance to some person is, jamming and be able to link together a whole bunch of nice turns, well positioned in the wave. That can be done on a sweet 7.6 in mid-length, and that's still HP. It's still pretty high performance because you're linking all the variables of the wave, and then jump on something you can glide out on. Something I'd suggest 10 feet. But so these days, I think a mid-7s and a 10-footer covers most stuff.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting period of time. I know that 20 odd years ago, I was often getting laughed at with the boards I was riding around here, and then sharing those same boards with friends and seeing how stoked they were on the glide of a fish, a stretched fish, a small fish,
Fish
any
are
kind
fabulous.
of wider board. Yeah. And I would say that right now, in terms of the feeling in lineups now, there's a whole lot more joy in the water.
Yeah.
There was a period there, don't you think, that 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, where there was a lot of aggro in the water.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it came from people being frustrated with the boards they were on.
Absolutely.
And struggling to catch waves.
Yep.
Struggling to continue riding the wave when the wave's energy dissipated.
Yeah, you had to
and
pump.
Yeah, and really working to
See that
to
a
have
lot at
fun.
the past still.
You can see that.
Guys on shortboards at the past. See it every day.
It's kind of an inappropriate thing for that lineup in some
Exactly,
ways.
it's inappropriate.
It looks like hard work.
Yeah.
But I think culturally what's interesting and worth celebrating right now is that there is an open-mindedness that wasn't around 10 years to 15 years ago. It wasn't really around. And we live in a bit of a bubble here. But do you feel the same sort of
Absolutely.
optimism around that?
Totally. I think Byron Bay itself has contributed a lot. Like Brookvale used to be the centre of surfboards back in the 60s. And Byron Bay is probably the hotbed of the surfboard culture, and a lot happens in the water around here all the time. Good quality stuff's happening all the time, new boards and different thinking. The guys next door, the stuff we did here. My son's amazing, the stuff that he puts together. I can't believe it. He just made a V bottom that I should have been making for decades. But I'm very critical about V bottoms because of 67. And the thing in the shop there, through that glassing room, he just blew me away this week with this mid-7s V bottom with super fine rails, and it's a sweet board. It's going to go off. But I can't visualise surfing it because I'm too old, and I used to throw it hard and drive them hard and powerful, and that's what that board's built for. And so I'm unfortunate I can't ride it, a tiny little board. But culturally, the diversity, obviously, everyone embracing the variety. And gliding, getting back to some of the purity and the simplicity and the buzz that comes from that. The sensation, as Dave said, taking a 10-foot board or 11-foot board out and feeling like you could be on a gun riding the Watergo's Bommy or Big Lennox, but you're doing it in a 2-footer. That's pretty fantastic. It's a feeling that, I don't want to quote Gordon Merchant, but only a glider knows the feeling. Misquote Gordon. Yeah, but it's a sensation that big boards, displacement boards, moving them through the water, it's often the transitions that feel super good. The trim thing, like right there, that high-speed trim, that is fantastic. But rolling into a turn with a big board, leaning your body weight against it. Phil Edwards was the king of that. If you see Phil Edwards' footage, he was riding a 10.6, 35-pound balsa board when he toured Australia in 1962 doing surfing holidays. And as he threw his turns, he could counteract his body weight with the momentum of this big board. So he could throw a turn and he would be angled, leaning, and then he'd start walking out of the turn. He'd come out of the turn and up into the trim zone, he's already on the nose because he was walking against a 35-pound board. So there's mass and momentum should come back. I don't want to carry him down the beach, but young guys on momentum boards is going to be wonderful. We'll see some of that on Sunday.
So exciting. Who are you looking forward to seeing trim this weekend on big boards?
Oh, great. Well, I hate to say it straight away, but it's Ray Gleave. That's a simple answer because Ray is, to me, is the best longboarder of the modern era, and not because he wins contests, but because he has such grace and style and masculinity with grace and elegance. You know, I mean, I love watching the girls on logs because and gliders because it suits their body form and elegance, which is fantastic. That's I've got to say this thing. Byron Bay has brought women and girls back into surfing.
So true.
I love Byron.
We're
for
so
that.
lucky to have Byron is such a hub of beautiful surfing all around, but women's surfing in particular.
Yeah, really, it's fantastic. But Ray, to me, epitomises the male version of glide and elegance, and does it better than anybody. Just watch that cutback. Watch how he puts the left arm out and leads his cuddy while he's doing this drop knee and whipping it around. It's pure grace. It's ballet. Yeah, it's Rudolf Nureyev, the way he surfs.
Can't wait to see it on Sunday.
Good.
Bob, I have a question for all of us who probably can really relate to you and in that we are all surf addicts, and we're being surf addicts, and we need to squeeze moments in the ocean into our lives. In your book, in More Stoked, I think it is, maybe in Stoked, you explain how at one stage you had your windsurfing sessions at Flat Rock down to such a fine degree of timing so you could wedge a session in between raising a family and your life commitments.
Yep.
What kind of advice can you give those of us here who have hopefully many decades of doing such a juggle? What's your advice to us? Like, how do we do that without being terrible partners, terrible parents, terrible children, and just generally pretty crap at life on land?
Boy, that's a brilliant question. It's so good. Like, I've been married 52 years, 54 years together.
Wow.
I think Lynn and I now are happier and more in love now than ever because the kids all grown up and all are doing their stuff. I'm no longer in such a rush. I mean, we're still not wealthy, and we'll never be. We've still got a mortgage, but I've put Lynn ahead of surfing lately, where secretly surfing always dominated me. And finally, Lynn's taken her rightful position as my number one. We are mongrels, us men. We are shockers.
Us women too.
That's what Lynn would say. Yeah, but it is a male-dominated planet, and I'm not really happy about that. Men have used... I'm preaching to the choir. But,
So are there signs that we can look for where we got to pull our heads in and come back to land and take care of our kids and our life in general? Are there things to look out for where it's becoming an unhealthy relationship, where there is suffering happening in that wake behind us in our daily life because we are singularly focused on waves?
That is the biggest question, and it's so true, Dave. And I made the mistake of letting surfing dominate me too long. It's got its rightful place. But at the same time, I've been a professional surfboard maker as well. So I've got a dang good excuse to go surfing. So there's been this game. But yes, I think surfing can be dangerously dominating. We have to be selective. And although it hurts, the waves are good, but you've got to do the yard work and you've got to paint that deck, and you've got to go shopping with your wife occasionally to buy something, I hated it for 40 years. The last 12 or 14's been much better.
Thanks for your honesty. I can really relate to the shopping thing.
Not with me.
No, not with you.
Some other wife.
Just in general. Shopping.
Good on you,
You
Dave.
nehave to come shopping with me. Happy to do that alone. Thanks.
Yeah.
We've hit the sore point.
It's way more efficient.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I just think it's...
Actually, Dave,
Yeah.
sorry, I have to tell everyone, Dave is the most ridiculous in a grocery setting. In the States, we'd be walking down aisles and he'd pick up things like squeezed cheese, like in a can.
No,
and
in a
he would
tube.
in a tube, and he would squirt it out on the floor in the shop, and then yell and say, "She did that," and then he tried to plant things in my bag and get me caught for shoplifting. So this is a sore point.
That's why I'm asking, are there signs to look out for where you're losing your shit? Because I think I've done that, and it's in Florida, where it's okay to lose your shit because it's Florida. So
Dave has an alter ego called Florida Dave when we go to Florida. Cause
things like that happen every day over there. But we're being jovial about it and jokey, but I do think there's something to really glean from moments where we sit with someone like yourself, Bob, who obviously has a lot of energy, vitality and enthusiasm still, and just wonder how you have done it. I've often wondered, we see the early film moments where you're bouncing around on screens just lit up, like so lit up, and surfing incredibly well and articulately. And I've often wondered, is that who you've always been? Did you, that was your youth, and it's understandable to have youthful exuberance, but you still have it now. How have you kept that? Is it just innately in you, or are there things we can do to keep that vibrance? Because a lot of us men, and I'm sure a lot of women do, but a lot of us men can calcify as we get older. We become rigid old bastards where everything's never as good as it used to be, and we're basically just rigid and without vibrance. How have you done it?
Surfing, because I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do when I turn my phone is I check the weather maps, see what the swell is, how big it is, what the wind's going to do. The sun's out after the rain, like this morning, and you go, oh, yippee, what a day. It's appreciating. And you said earlier when we were chatting, Dave, you said the wonderful, life is wonderful. You know what that means? It's full of wonder and wonder. Okay, we're looking at the screen here. What could you do different? What if you had a different rail there or a different hull? Or the fins were different? What if that was a twin fin instead of a single? It's wonder. It's wondering. Wondering what's possible. Wondering what today will bring. Wondering what it'll be like when I get to the beach. It's wonder. I don't know how you package it and translate it, but wonder is the key to living. It's to make life great. There's so much potential. There's so much ahead still. At 80, there's so much ahead. There's a wonderful life ahead. Appreciating being on this planet with all this wonderful creation around us for us to enjoy and wonder.
Thanks for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented, absolute legend, Ben Jake Alexander. The soundtrack was composed by Shannon Soul Carroll, with additional tunes by Ben. We have a few new Water People experiments this season. You can find every episode of the podcast on our Water People YouTube page, or subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, and behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast.